Hello, I am Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be talking about the Extreme Event Rush Godfest, as well as a debut for a new Godfest exclusive tier list that I've made. So, as with any Godfest, what determines if you roll or not is based upon your monster box and what is available. Basically, you have to try and weigh the pros and cons of what you can acquire from it at higher rates as to what you potentially need. Now, obviously, it's hard to make broad sweeping statements of roll yes or roll no, but in the case of this Godfest, I strongly suggest you don't roll. This is a bad Godfest. And the reason why it's a bad Godfest is because all it offers is 4 times Godfest exclusives with no other Pantheon alongside. So that means you are basically running a very high risk of being left empty-handed, because in all honesty, 4 times, while may have sounding impressive a year ago, is actually not that great presently. This is partially because, from my understanding, that the cards all have a lower chance of being rolled on an individual basis, just because the pool of monsters to draw from is larger. So the 4 times is actually to help offset the 3 times from before. So you're probably having about equal roll rates, but now that there's no Pantheon to buffer against, you're probably going to be rolling lots of silvers and Gala exclusives. So it's not a strong Godfest roll overall, and I could have just ended my review right there, but I wanted to take the time to try and experiment with something a little new and create a tier list for Godfest exclusive cards, because it can be beneficial to at least rank them accordingly to also help you better decide if you should roll in future Godfest when certain days only feature certain Godfest exclusives. Now, my tier list is basically going to be based off of my own opinions, as well as trying to gain a grasp of how everyone can best use this card from a generalized point of view. Naturally, if the card is exceptionally strong for yourself, it's going to have more value, whereas potentially a very strong card for the general population may have less value if it does not fit in your monster box. So when evaluating all the cards, I try to take into consideration their value as a leader, a sub, an inherit, their niche uses, as well as how valuable duplicates are, because sometimes they are required in duplicate amounts. And generally speaking, if this is the very first time you've ever acquired a card, you should still not sell it, regardless of where it shows up in the tier list. Just because it's at the very bottom and it's your first one does not mean you should instantly sell it, because in theory, those ones have the most potential to grow. And you should just generally never sell something you don't have a duplicate of, regardless of how strong or useless it may be. Now, outside of the very top category, all the other ones are just in whatever random order, and it's mostly just for my copy-paste master list. It's just as I'm going through, I'm like, oh, it goes here, it goes here. They're not in particular order, and again, it does have differing values for each person. And I will try and justify and explain my rationale for each one a little down below. Now, if you do feel like anything is out of place, please let me know, and I'll try to do my best to address each and every one of your concerns. So right now, this is my Godfest exclusive tier list for basically February 17th of 2017. And this is taking into consideration the future cards we will be receiving from various Japan evolutions. For instance, the new Monster Point Dragon evolutions, which will be coming, such as Yomi Dragon and Raw Dragon, who are very powerful, will have implications for some of the cards showing up a little higher, as well as Dark Athena. So, presently speaking, Kana, Dark Kali, and Kaede comprise the 3 strongest cards in Puzzle and Dragons, and it's actually in, I'd say, descending order, with Kana perhaps being the strongest card available. Now, it may be a little surprising to say Kana is the strongest Godfest exclusive card right now, but that is because she's used on several key high-end teams, such as Miru, Raw Dragon, and Dark Athena. And because of that flexibility and the fact that she appears on basically 3 top-tier teams, it means she basically is going to be the most valuable and desirable one overall. While her base active skill is lackluster, the fact that she has so many TPAs and unbindable in her light form means she's pretty much irreplaceable. In that same train of thought, Dark Kali is almost as valuable, except she's only really used on Raw Dragon teams. But you do need 2 of her, and in theory duplicates for inheritance purposes in terms of stat transfer and skill delay protection. So again, she's a very powerful and desirable card for that reason. And finally we come to Kaede, who is on a bit of a decline slope, mostly because their team is very orb hungry, and it's very challenging to have enough wood orbs present, as well as the heart cross. And system-like teams do tend to falter in very high content, because when you have a system team, you need to dedicate 4 active skills to looping your system, and that only leaves 2 other options for utility, and you probably will run out of things and have a great deal of difficulty, say, countering the radar dragons in Arena 3. So that's partially why Coyote is on the decline, but thankfully they're still a very powerful leader, and you do need duplicate Coyotes for the system, as well as 2 Coyotes for Runaway teams. Now, I'd like to have the 3 checkmark tier list as the top, basically just kind of segregate, showing you these are like the better Godfest exclusives. It does not mean that the ones in the category below are weak by any means. It just means that these ones are a bit stronger by comparison. And in all honesty, the cards that appear in the 2 checkmark category are very powerful. And for the most part, they are somewhat irreplaceable on many teams, and it's very hard to duplicate what they do. For instance, Green Odin is perhaps one of the best bind clearing options in the game. He provides 5 turns of bind clear and also 5 turns of awoken bind clear, as well as a modest heal. So you can't really replicate or replace that, so he is quite valuable. Furthermore, with his new evolution, he has much more viability as a sub on various teams because he does have 3 skill boosts, an extra TP8, and a recover bind, so he's actually very powerful. And also in this category, you may feel like Australis is maybe a little weaker, but in all honesty, it's one of the stronger wood inherits, and it's a great alternative to Awoken Lubei's. If you don't have him and you use her paired with Awoken Lubei, you still can button through plenty of content. The other cards in this category, like Ryune, Sarasvati, are helping their Heart Cross meta equivalents, as well as Ryune being valuable in Dark Athena, Aizen teams as well. Ilm is a solid leader, Shadis Roots has a unique active, Gremory is a powerful leader and sub, which will become even stronger with her future buff. Ranave still is a potent leader, and Eshimali has great value on Yomi Dragon, Dark Athena, and Aizen teams. So again, all the cards in this double checkmark category are very valuable, and you can also inherit their skills around for even additional utility. The next category are monsters that are powerful for sure, but they're not as needed necessarily. While being strong, you don't really have to require them for your team to succeed. They may bring an extra layer of value to your team, but it's not as crucial compared to the ones in the tier bracket above. Now, Blue Sonya does stand out from her 2 sisters, mostly because it has value on Dark Athena teams for their board change, as well as, I guess, Aizen teams as well, or just being a good health stick in general because her base health is so high. Blue Odin's new evolution allows him to become a hard bind clear because he's now bind immune with great stats and lots of rows. So he can transform into a row-based bind clearing sub. Erd, Scald, and Verdandi always have valuable board changes because they do at least produce hard orbs. Balboa has gained a little bit more value with his new evolution. And Sylvie kind of falls in the same category as the Erd, Scald, and Verdandi, but it's just weaker than Ryune and Saria just because it's not as beneficial for as many teams by comparison. Sheet, while having a powerful active, has very little value as a sub. Paimon, or Paimon, however you want to pronounce his name, again, is useful, but it's not that great on a mirror team. It does tend to cause too many orb enhances and problems against Parvati, as well as his active skill not being that impactful. Sumerik is an okay leader, but the main problem Sumire suffers from is that a system team kind of falters in high-end content and has relatively low damage output, especially when compared to any of the higher-end leaders out there. By comparison, Tsubaki, while being a fun leader, is actually quite a powerful sub on many mono fire teams, just because the double Dragon Killer allows you to have tremendous damage output against various encounters. And Dark Metatron is just a great stat stick and a base for skill inheritance. Finally, we're coming to basically the question mark category, and the question mark category is basically just luxury cards. You don't really need them. They may help you a bit. It may be nice to have, but they're not necessarily worth pursuing. And in all honesty, all the cards in this category do make sense. Like, they do have value, but it's not mandatory value. Perhaps arguments or exceptions can be made for Red Odin, but while he is perhaps a premier button farming luxury card, you don't really need it that badly. If you want to inherit a poison, you have Red Odin Tamazo, which most players do have at this point, so you don't actually need him. Plus, you also have Neptune if you really want another inheritable poison. So again, you don't need Red Odin, and that's why I feel like he is justified being placed into the question mark category. And finally, basically the Red X category are cards that are shining bright in my eye, but these cards do not shine bright, unfortunately. Basically, all these cards are in desperate need of a buff or an evolution to at least give them some sort of viability. Like the blue Sharius active skill is basically the same as Light Callie's, and again, we want board changes that make hearts. Light Metatron has not been in the meta for I don't know how many years at this point. And Fenrir and Fenrir Viz, again, the Jammer meta never really took off. Maybe you could make arguments for a base for skill inheritance, but their active skill is not helpful enough to really justify it. So they're just desperately needing buffs, and even if you do manage to roll those cards for, say, the very first time, you should still not throw them away or vendor them because they are technically the ones that could have the most benefit and potential to grow by comparison because they are basically the bottom of the figurative barrel. So, in conclusion for all this, you should not roll in this Godfest, but mostly I want your feedback onto this tier list. Like, how do you feel the rankings play out? Do you think everyone's place is justifiable? And yes, I'm very well aware that certain cards within each bracket may have more value than other cards in it, but for the most part, I feel like they've been segregated relatively well. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I plan to include this in all future Godfest posts and update it accordingly as new changes or buffs are released. So that's something to look forward to in future Godfest posts because it will at least help provide some basis for rolling or not when certain Godfest exclusives are featured on particular days. So hopefully you all have a fantastic evening. Best of luck for those who really, really want to roll in the Godfest, and happy puzzling!